right, so we'll start. So you think he organized with these two men or something else? These two men were just kind of on the
Patsies.
part of his disappearance.
No, the two men were patsies.
They were patsies. Okay, explain that a bit more.
I think that, yes, there was a meet and greet sort of thing, but the very fact he waited and then all of a sudden he disappeared and these two guys still hadn't shown up by then, to me, they were patsies. He had to lay a path so people would think that something happened to him, because what is 7 years you got to wait if you can't find a body to declare them. So if he had any kind of insurance, which one would think as the union leader, he would have put insurance on himself. His family had to wait that length of time to be able to collect.
Wow.
And now, Radio Sydney presents Seeing Dead People, episode 64, The Disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. Welcome to Seeing Dead People, the slow burn storytelling podcast where our host, Nicola, challenges her psychic friend Darcy to communicate with the dead and unravel historical ghost stories, unsolved true crime mysteries, and all things paranormal. If you want to be spooked, amazed, and entertained, stick around for an astonishing, deep dive convo with the spirits on the other side.
Hey, Darcy, how you doing?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
I'm great, and I'm, as always, I look so much forward to talking to you about our Seeing Dead People and to catching up how you're doing. Today's just, we got such a gorgeous day in September. Steve, how lovely our weather is. I know you've been busy, but getting outside at least a little bit.
Yep. Can't you tell I'm sunburnt?
A little bit, although you're not as red as your chair. Okay, well, today on Seeing Dead People, Darcy, we're going to do things a little bit differently because you mentioned to me you wanted to cover something we haven't covered before. It's an enduring mystery. I mean, it's huge. It's always in the sort of sphere of people talking about it, often used as a bit of a joke, but it's a serious business. We're going to talk about the disappearance of a man named Jimmy Hoffa in the mid-70s. So I'm going to ask you up front. Normally I try to trick you and you don't know what we're talking about, but today, of course, you know, because you suggested Jimmy Hoffa. Why did you suggest Jimmy Hoffa? Don't tell me where he is yet, but why did you suggest him?
I'm going to send a shout out to Sandra because she's a friend of mine and we were talking about the show and she goes, have you ever considered doing Jimmy Hoffa? And I went, who's that?
Oh, you're kidding. You didn't really know about Jimmy Hoffa?
Yes and no, but it didn't stick. And then she told me about him and that he just disappeared. And I went, oh, that's a good one. Let's have a look.
It is a good one. Okay, so you don't really know much about him at all. You're just someone else is suggesting him.
Yes, I know he's a gangster. That's about the only thing about him I know.
Okay, well, that's fantastic. Well, I shall tell you a little bit about him and we'll start looking at a few photographs. He was a man who lived in the shadows, but he disappeared not in the shadows, but in the broad daylight. So on July 30th, end of July 1975, Jimmy Hoffa drove to a quiet suburban restaurant outside of Detroit. That was his area. Dressed, very sharp dresser, always was. He projected power, even though at that time, a lot of his power had been stripped away. He was starting to fade as the well-known business kind of labor guy, and we'll get into the details of his life at this time. He told his wife he was meeting two men that he knew at around 2:00 at the restaurant. One man, and they got great nicknames as usual. One fellow was called Anthony Giacalone, and he was called Tony Jack, not to be confused probably with Tony John and Tony Fred and Tony James or whatever, but Tony's. He was a Detroit mobster, so you're getting an idea of the kind of people Jimmy Hoffa dealt with, okay? And another Tony called Anthony Provenzano, and he was called Tony Pro. So we have Tony Jack and Tony Pro. Tony Jack is a mobster. Tony Pro is a mob boss, okay? So Jimmy Hoffa had been close to Tony Pro, the mob boss, but then they feuded. So things were kind of tense between the two men. Anyway, Jimmy comes to the restaurant on time because that's the kind of man he is. He parks, he waits. And he waits. gets a little frustrated at about 10, 15 minutes, gets out of his car, starts pacing the parking lot. He's very annoyed. Keeps looking at his watch. Nobody coming. 2:30 in the afternoon. Nobody coming. And then suddenly, 2:30, a little bit after 2:30 in the afternoon, Jimmy Hoffa disappeared. Just
But he was
gone. Gone. Okay? His car was found later, empty, so he drove away, or somehow the car got away. All right. His body was never recovered. And to this day, it's not recovered. And his disappearance, as I said at the top, remains one of the most enduring mysteries in American history. So lots of people, kind of make fun of things when they have somebody wears a mask. They say, who's behind that mask? Oh, it could be Jimmy Hoffa, or something's dug up, could be Jimmy Hoffa. So unfortunately, he's kind of come into the lexicon since he disappeared in the 70s, that it's kind of a joke, but it's no joke. The man died somehow.
Yeah.
We think he died anyway. I would imagine by 2025, even if he hadn't died, he's dead now. So let's talk a little bit about Hoffa, but let's have a look at him. Look at your photo number 1, which funnily enough is a mugshot. So he had a few problems with the law, shall we say.
Oh yeah. But he's handsome.
39. So he's quite a young man, dark haired, a bit fleshy, but attractive.
Yep.
So what do you think of this James Hoffa of 1939, the young man?
I would say he's definitely trying to make a name for himself. It's like he's trying to fill someone else's shoes, or maybe he's trying to make his shoes even bigger. I think violence may have been his name growing up, like in a family where there was a lot of violence, because it definitely feels there's that kind of connection. Do you know if he was arrested here for shooting someone?
I don't believe so. I believe this was like petty theft.
Okay.
This time. Yeah.
So then that would say to me, looking at him, what it felt like is, when you're growing up and money's tight and you're always, I know you're saying petty theft, but I think it was something that was prevalent for him. So maybe stealing just became a habit.
Okay. So you were saying growing up kind of without money, growing up poor. How do you know that? He's wearing a nice suit. He looks well tended.
Just the feel of him. It's mainly the feel of him.
Okay.
This is a facade, like this is how people want to see you, not necessarily how you are. I would tell you you'd probably be better in a t-shirt with no sleeves than dressed like this.
Yeah, right. Tony. Yeah, okay. To understand that, we need to know a little bit more about him, and you're very close in what he was originally, where he came from. He was born James Riddle Hoffa in 1913 in Indiana. Came from nothing. His father died when he was young, and he had to quit school to help support his family. So by the teens, he was working in warehouses, back-breaking labor, making very little money. And this early hardship really forged a mission in this man. He decided he was going to fight for the workers who were invisible to the bosses and the government alike, okay? And he rose quickly through the ranks of the union called the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. You may have heard of them. They're the truck drivers, okay? A huge union, and at that time became even more so with him involved. He was a tough guy, he was tireless, and he was utterly fearless. By the 50s, he transformed the Teamsters, so he began to run the show, into the most powerful labor union in America. So he had millions of truckers, dock workers, and warehouse men looking to him as their leader and their champion, a man who came from nothing, like most of them, pushing them forward, showing who they are, and showing up the bosses and the government. The employers feared him, and the politicians had to court him because he had a lot of votes that listened to him and nobody else. He gave his working men better wages and benefits than they'd ever dreamed of. So he did incredibly well for his union. But his strengths came with some darkness. To get this union power, he made deals with organized crime. Mobsters saw the Teamsters' vast pension fund as a gold mine to get loans and for money laundering. Jimmy Hoffa saw the mob as muscle, and they would enforce contracts for him and break his rivals. So it was a strong but very dangerous alliance to be with the mob as well as a union trying to forge your way forward. This alliance would eventually consume him. So he starts to do really well. 60s, 50s, and 60s, he's at the peak. He's got a huge amount of influence. And he's at the peak of federal scrutiny, too. A name you're very familiar with, I'm sure, as of today, Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy, so another Kennedy, the original Kennedy for the Roberts, made Hoffa his personal crusade. He wanted that guy shut down. He thought Jimmy Hoffa was corrupt. He thought he was dangerous, and he was certain he was unfit to lead. Now, of course, he was obviously Hoffa was doing a bang-up job, so he wasn't unfit to lead. But perhaps he was corrupt and perhaps he was dangerous. They had Senate hearings like they still do today, and they grilled each other, really. And Kennedy was relentless in grilling Hoffa, but Hoffa, like totally defiant, the ultimate street fighter, stood up to him toe-to-toe. In 67, the law finally caught up to him. He was convinced of jury tampering, fraud, and bribery. He went to prison, but he never gave up control of the Teamsters. Even behind the bars, he controlled the Teamsters and he pulled all the strings. So I would like to look at photo number 2. This is Jimmy in the 60s. So this is Jimmy, the class man, the tough guy who's on top.
So is this before he went to jail then?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah, he looks like a normal, 9 to 5 type of guy, really, when you look at him there.
Yeah.
Again, you can still tell that he's got the memory of his past in him. I mean, it's hard for you guys to see it, but for me.
Yeah.
But what I like is he's sort of, I don't know if you'd call that a smile or not, but even his eyes are smiling. He looks like someone you could talk to. Here, he looks a little softer than he did in his first picture.
I think so. He's obviously incredibly successful here at this time in his life. I think probably things are rolling pretty well for him, right? He's at the top of the game. He controls millions of people. He's got the government having to kowtow a bit to him, even though Robert Kennedy's on his tail, and he's got the mob working with him. So I think he thinks it's a pretty good show.
He's in a good spot.
Yeah, he's in a good spot. However, by 67, the spot changes. He gets caught, as I said, he gets sent to prison, but he hung on to the Teamsters. And then in 71, and I don't quite know why this happened, but Richard Nixon, president, commuted his sentence. So let him out of prison, but with one condition. A biggie, he was barred from union activity for a decade. So he wasn't supposed to be involved with the Teamsters anymore. That was over. But do you think someone like Hoffa would let that go?
Oh, I wouldn't. I'd still be back there. I now got the clout behind me of other questionable personnel. I wouldn't let it go. And I don't think he did either. When you're saying that, that's not the feel I get.
You're totally right. This is not a man who backs down for anybody. I can see that.
Yep.
He lived for the union. That's what he brought him up as a kid. That's what his whole métier was. That's what he gained his reputation and fame for. He wasn't going to give it up, and he wasn't going to sit on the sidelines for anybody. So he wanted the throne of the Teamsters back, the head position. And he began maneuvering in the back rooms, plotting a comeback. But when that happens, what do you think he did? He irritated, threatened, powerful men. Okay.
I was going to say that he stepped on toes maybe he shouldn't have stepped on.
Exactly. And he stepped on toes in the union, which is one thing, but then he stepped on toes in the mob, which is another. Like, those dudes are scary. So that's not really good. So we're now back to the summer of 75. So we know Jimmy Hoffa's had a great rising, done really well. Then he's had a bit of a fall. Then he gets this commuted sentence by Richard Nixon. That's nice of him. Supposed to stay out of his business, but of course he doesn't. Starts making people upset. So he really thinks he's going to meet Giacolone and Provenzano, the two Tonys. He thinks he's going to broker peace with them, clear a path for his resurrection. It was risky. One of them, as I said, Provenzano, Tony Joe, I think, in particular, Tony Pro was despised by him. But he was really bold, that Jimmy Hoffa. He didn't give in for anything. So he's waiting around, and then he just vanishes. So no sign of a struggle. Cars found, He's just simply erased from the planet. Of course, this is a big deal, right? Jimmy
Yeah.
Hoffa disappears. My God, one of the most famous men disappears in broad daylight. So, yes, the FBI launches an investigation, which is kind of ironic because I'm sure they were against him when he was known and alive or about. They dug up fields, they drained lakes, they followed leads across the whole state lines into other states. Every rumor was pursued. Nothing panned out. Lots of theories. So let's talk about what you think happened to Jimmy Hoffa before I give you some of the theories that they say are out there.
Okay. So I'm going to deal with the way I would perceive it is that Tony P and Tony Jack,
Yeah.
one of them arranged for him to be taken out. The fact that there was no struggle makes you think that he had to know the people to be able to get out of the vehicle without a struggle. One would think he'd known. So mobsters, back then anything could have happened. Into the water, way down. That's one I would say was definite. Dissolved. If you watch enough murder mysteries and stuff, dissolve him in a vat of, is it lime or lye? Anyways, one or the other.
Yeah, I think so.
Bury him.
Yeah.
Definite. Back then they didn't have the radar for ground penetration, I don't think. So, you could have buried him small enough that an animal could take off with his carcass. But the idea here would be more, I actually don't think he was killed. I think he disappeared. That's what it feels like. Yeah, to me, it feels, and here I'm going to rule out, like I'm certain there were conspiracy theories that thought aliens took him off, but I don't think so. I think he came to an agreement. Okay. My feel is that he may have fled the country for Brazil or something like that. Maybe he knew what was going to happen. So lay the path. Here we are, we're getting blamed two mobsters for my disappearance.
Well,
so he may have fled the country.
That's a real twist. Okay, I like that. Well, I'll tell you what the theories are. Okay, some said that he was buried under the newly built Giants baseball stadium. So the old into the concrete you go. Okay, no, all right. Others claimed he'd been stuffed into a steel drum and shipped overseas. No. Okay, or incinerated in a mob-controlled crematorium.
Oh, I didn't think of that.
Okay, or buried beneath a Detroit driveway or highway being built, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then every year, every decade brings new digs, new clues, new people coming forward saying they know something. Of course, they're all dead ends. So
I'd say look in Brazil.
Sorry?
Look in Brazil.
Brazil. Okay. Well, let's look at photo number 3. I think he looks very attractive here. Older guy. This is the day, I understand, the day he died. This is Jimmy Hoffa, the day he died.
This is a very handsome older man. Very more relaxed. Yeah. If he hadn't died a natural death, I'm pretty sure cancer would have got him. But yeah, like he's not as approachable as a grandpa would be, if you looked at someone else his age. But that he's definitely seen a lot in life. But he still feels comfortable.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how to describe it. I would have liked
this man, not necessarily the man from the other 2 photographs.
No, this one I would have liked.
Yeah, this has a real charm to it, I think, this photograph, yes. This man. Yeah, it's
interesting. Whoever did the picture did a fantastic job.
Yeah, it's interesting, though. He's been through a lot, right? He's come out of jail. He's had a lot of heartache in his life. And he's looking, as you say, it's a really fine picture. He looks very attractive. He didn't look nearly as attractive in the other 2 pictures, or as relaxed, or kind of as confident, I didn't find. I thought more of like you said, a facade. This looks like him. That's what I imagine. I don't know.
That's how and I didn't realize it was 1975. I was actually going back and thinking, I think I was just graduating high school then.
That makes sense. So you wouldn't have heard about it.
No. Yeah. I was too busy with getting in trouble.
Well, what you really think that, see, everybody thinks, okay, there's a motive to getting rid of him, right? He wants his power back, and he's threatening mob bosses, and he's threatening whoever else is in the union now with the power. So there's a pretty powerful motive to take this guy out.
Oh, absolutely. He's in the way. People are still going to follow him no matter what. But I get the impression he knew what was going to happen, so he set it up himself, so that it would look like someone did something to him, disappeared. I would still say my guess is he fled the country.
Wow, he left his family alone behind.
He had no choice. Like if he had stuck there, there could have been retaliation, not just to him, but to his own family, depending on what mob syndicate it was. At least if you pay attention to everything that's shown on TV, like you said earlier, being caught in that crossfire of political aspirations in the mob, something's going to happen. If it's not to you, then it's going to happen to someone you care about.
Okay, so you're saying Jimmy Hoffa knew he really didn't have a future, what he was trying to accomplish.
Yes.
He couldn't broker a deal. He was out, and he was going to be if he kept pushing.
Yep.
And so you think he organized with these two men, or something else? That these two men were just kind of on the part of his disappearance.
No, the two men were patsies.
They were patsies. Okay, explain that a bit more.
I think that, yes, there was a meet and greet sort of thing, but the very fact he waited and then all of a sudden he disappeared and these two guys still hadn't shown up by then, to me, they were patsies. He had to lay a path so people would think that something happened to him, because when it's 7 years, you got to wait if you can't find a body to declare them. So if he had any kind of insurance, which one would think as the union leader, he would have put insurance on himself. His family had to wait that length of time to be able to collect.
Wow. So he set this up. He gets himself somehow gone, as you say, off to Brazil, which I have to admit is a good country, because a lot of the Nazis went to Brazil. No extradition, and I guess not a bad country to live in. So you think Jimmy Hoffa went off to Brazil in 1975 on July 30th or whatever, close thereafter, lived for a while, lived for a long time, still alive?
I would have said it's possible he would have passed in 1990, 95, somewhere in there.
Okay, because he was born in 13, so he'd be in his 80s at that time, which is a good age to die, I guess. So if he went 75, and you're saying he might have died in the 90s, he lived a lot more years in
than
Brazil.
People give him credit for.
Absolutely. Quietly, we presume, keeping his mouth.
I would say that he kept a low profile. He would have had enough money put aside for himself.
Wow. And do you think his family ever found out?
My instincts will say no.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Everything, when you ask that question, I hear no.
And do you think, you mentioned that he organized this as a protection as well for his family, so he could make a deal. Let's say he made a deal with these mob bosses. I'm going to disappear, so you can't go after my family. I'm not going to take over the union anymore. You got to leave my family alone. But the deal is I'm gone and they don't get to know about it. Is that the deal?
No, that wasn't the deal. He was supposed to meet with them. I think he was smart enough to run without telling anyone.
Oh, okay. So he just decided, I'm bunking it because I'm not going to. Oh, wow. And he
that's what it feels like to me.
Okay.
I feel that what I keep hearing is I abandoned. So to me, that would mean he abandoned his family to save them.
Okay, so it's not so much Jimmy Hoffa disappeared, it's Jimmy Hoffa chose to disappear.
And I believe so. I mean, I can be wrong, and like everyone else's theory, and I'm open to that. But I just feel like he's a smart man. Why would he go somewhere where between two rivals that already have shown that they don't want him in that position.
Good
He doesn't
point.
strike me as a dumb man.
No, I don't think he could have got to the top of the Teamsters union
Yeah.
and negotiating deals with mobsters without being a smart dude. You know, streets maybe, but smart. Not
Mhm.
educated per se in a formal manner, but certainly educated on the street. And in the area that he needed to be educated, he certainly was. Well, I'll be darned. I never would have come up with that. That's a great one. Jimmy Hoffa
And
chose to
I didn't even think of that until we started talking.
Oh, cool. Well, there you go. Well done, Darcy. I like that. I think it's it's a sensible solution, I think. It's as
Oh, I
good
think
as
so.
he got whacked and put under the Giants stadium, you know.
I think it would have been a shame if he got whacked and put under a giant stadium. Not that he wouldn't have enjoyed as it goes to baseball games.
Was he a fan, you think?
I do believe so.
And the Red Sox, right? Detroit Red
Yeah.
Sox?
That's what I was hearing, Red Sox. So, and I'm
Cool.
thinking, is that football or baseball? But I think it's baseball.
Yeah, it's baseball. It's the Detroit Lions of the football.
Okay.
Okay. So a Red Sox fan. Well, isn't that cool? Well, thanks. That was amazing. I really was thinking you were going to say to me he's buried under the Eiffel Tower or some ridiculous thing, or under
No.
Square, or he's been chopped up and fed to pigs or something.
No, definitely a no.
Okay, good. All right. That's great. Well, thanks. That was interesting to find out Jimmy Hoffa didn't disappear. He chose to disappear. That's a big difference. And he had a life. I mean, I kind of, I obviously he was a guy on the wrong side of the law in many ways, but I do, that last photograph, that photo number 3, I mean, I just think, how can you not like that man?
I know. How can you not?
Yeah. How could you not want him to have like a life beyond this photograph, this moment?
When you think about it, he really earned it from where he started to where he ended. Sure, back then you had to cross the law sometimes, but he was doing it for a good reason.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. He was trying to help his people, others like him. Yeah, I think that's true. And I think you can't look at that picture and not want that guy to have more of a life. So
Yes,
I hope.
absolutely.
Great. Well done. Because I would hope that Jimmy Hoffa has had more of a life.
Thank you for listening to Seeing Dead People, where goosebumps are guaranteed. We would love to hear from you with questions for Darcy about her psychic process or suggestions for other mystifying situations you would like us to investigate. Please shoot us an email to info@radiosydney.ca with Seeing Dead People in the subject line. New episodes air on our website, radiosydney.ca, on the first Saturday of every month. Episodes repeat Saturday nights at 8 p.m. and Sunday mornings at 10 a.m., both Pacific time. All episodes are available as downloadable podcasts at our website or on our YouTube channel, Nicola Furlong Mysteries. I'm Dorian Mortis, weirdly keen on seeing dead people. This has been a presentation of Radio Sydney.